Joc Pederson has been the Giants' hottest hitter and really one of the hottest hitters in baseball to start the 2022 season. And he goes down with an injury last night for a team that already has dealt with a lot of injuries. The Giants couldn't muster any runs and they get shut out. So we'll talk about that, but we'll talk about some positives as well. And how about the A's president arguing with a seagull? Next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. This Mother's Day, give mom something she'll treasure forever with fine jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On Sports listeners get $50 off $500. Use code LOCKEDON at checkout. So yeah, coming up on today's show, a lot to cover really, even though it was just a boring, in a way, disappointing 1-0 loss. It wasn't boring. It was just disappointing and frustrating. And it was at the tail end of this huge stretch of games in a row for the Giants. I know they had the one game that was rained out, but then they played a doubleheader. So it's been a brutal stretch going on the road for 11 games and then coming home without an off day, playing 2 games. So a much needed day off for a lot of people. The big takeaway is that Joc Pederson got hurt in this game last night. It was a groin injury. Pederson said, quote, "I was trying to get in the way of the throw and took a bad step. I kind of just took a weird step at a weird angle and it tightened up." So he came out of the game at that point, and really it hurt not only their future prospects, right, because Pederson might miss some time, but it hurt them in this game specifically because they had to go to Austin Slater, which meant that Slater wasn't available to pinch hit against some lefties, so they had some lefties facing a tough lefty. It just messed them up, and it was just a game that was ultimately very frustrating. A 1-0 loss. Giants had some chances, including a bases-loaded one-out situation with Brandon Belt at the plate, and he hit into a double play. So there were a lot of negatives on offense, but on the positive side, they also got another great relief outing from Jakob Junis. So we'll break that down in a little more detail later as well. But for Pederson, he's going to come in today to get treatment, and he's going to get an MRI. And it is possible, they're saying, that he could end up on the injured list. So that would be a most unfortunate circumstance for the Giants. But I just want to add, just like without LaMonte Wade, just like without Mike Yastrzemski, the whole point and theme of this team is that they have different guys who can step in and fill that role. And so as great as Pederson has been, he's not going to continue to be as good as he's been, right? He's been performing at an unsustainably great rate. And so it's easy to look at that and be like, they're doomed without that. But of course he wasn't going to continue that. And he's a good platoon player. And I think they have a lot of good platoon players, including a couple who are close to coming back in LaMonte Wade Jr., who played in another rehab assignment game for AAA yesterday, and he's close to coming back. And then Mike Yastrzemski can start testing PCR tests on Friday to hopefully be able to test negative twice and then come back. And so to have Yastrzemski and Wade coming back would really, I'm not going to say they wouldn't notice the absence of Joc Pederson, but if you're able to go with Wade in left, Yastrzemski in center, and Luis Gonzalez in right, not really missing a beat there. Yes, you would obviously rather have Pederson than Luis Gonzalez, but as we've seen, Luis Gonzalez can play a little bit. And so I think that they'll be fine. But in the meantime, if they're still without Wade and Yastrzemski and Joc Pederson, that's going to hurt you. But that hopefully will only be a few games, and it might be this series against the Nationals that's coming up starting on Friday. So I guess in a way, it's good that it is against a lesser Nationals team. We just saw the Giants were able to go out and sweep them. Doesn't mean they're going to do it again, but it does mean they're the better team and they should have a good shot of winning some of those games. But the Giants then do play the Dodgers on after the National Series. I think it's on Tuesday and Wednesday, or it could be Monday and Tuesday. But I think they'll be able to weather the storm, assuming this is a relatively minor injury for Joc Pederson, and it's just kind of what they do. And I think they'll be able to handle it. So there was a lot more to come out of this game. There's definitely some guys who are struggling, and it's starting to, we're not at the point where we can like conclude, okay, they're just bad now, like Darren Ruff. But we are at the point where you start thinking about doing something about it, like maybe giving someone else that opportunity, because Ruff is playing every day. And that was kind of the thing, is that in the last couple of years, he was mostly a platoon player, getting his starts against left-handed pitching. This year, he's been out there every day, and they've seen almost exclusively right-handed pitchers. It's not like he's done well in his at-bats against lefties either, but he is. That's the thing, is like maybe when you're facing so many righties as a right-handed hitter, and it's a little bit more challenging, it can get you into a funk. And clearly he's in a funk, and he just can do nothing right now at the plate. So I think this off day comes at a good time for Darren Ruff. They did move him down in the lineup from third to fifth. Wilmer Flores moved up. So it is about that point where you start tweaking things a little bit. But again, it's too early to look at this and be like, well, Darren Ruff is just bad now. No, we also count what he's done the last couple of years. We combine it with this. Maybe he's not quite as great as he looked the last couple years. This is just kind of a small sample, though, when we put the whole picture together. But it is the first real sample of him being more of an everyday player versus more of a platoon guy. His numbers against righties were still good the last couple of years, but there was definitely some worse characteristics, like more swing and miss, more strikeout against right-handed pitching. And I really think it's more of a matter of you struggle a little bit and then you get in a funk because of your struggles. It's not necessarily like if you suddenly put out a lefty, he's going to be great. I think that he's in a funk, and I don't know exactly how he's going to get out of it, but I would assume he's not going to be this bad for the entirety of the season. But there's that. There's Joey Bart continuing to strike out 50% of the time, which is an issue, and the injuries. So for me, that's kind of what's going on with the offensive group. And on the positive side, the Giants only allowed one run in this game. And normally you're going to win when you only allow one run. And a big reason they were able to do it was they got another great, 5-inning performance out of Jakob Junis. Yeah, both times he's gone out there in relief, he's pitched 5 brilliant innings. So we'll talk about Jakob Junis next. And as I said in the open, we'll also eventually get to the A's president arguing with a seagull. Yes, you heard me right. Whether she prefers a statement piece or everyday subtle elegance, BlueNile.com has fine jewelry options for every mom. Shop high-quality classic diamond earrings, elegant tennis bracelets, or gemstone pendant necklaces. Looking for fine jewelry but having trouble choosing? Totally me. Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7. Available via phone or chat to help you find a memorable gift at every budget. Mark Mother's Day with something enduring. Classic diamond stud earrings, elegant tennis bracelets, birthstone pendants, and so much more on BlueNile.com. This Mother's Day, give mom something she'll treasure forever with fine jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On Sports listeners get $50 off $500. This podcast exclusive is only good through Mother's Day. Use code LOCKEDON. That's code LOCKEDON. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever peace. Go to BlueNile.com today. All right, as promised, we're going to continue talking about this game. 1-0 loss. I mean, man, if they could have just scratched a couple of runs across, we'd get to talk about the positives. Right. And when you lose 1-0, we have to focus on the negatives. That's just how baseball is. And on the positive side, we'll talk about their record and their run differential and all that. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Now podcast. Recaps of MLB games with analysis from our local experts, taking fans through the season like no other network. free and available wherever you get podcasts. So yeah, I really should do this in the beginning, but the Giants are now 13-6 with the loss. It is the second best record in baseball, so not so doom and gloom after one little loss here. The Giants have a plus 44 run differential, which is tied with the Dodgers for the best run differential in baseball. Run differential, for those who don't know, it's simply runs scored minus runs allowed. Think of the season like one giant game, and the Giants are winning by 44. That's what run differential is. And that run differential actually has an expected win-loss record of 15-4. So the Giants are underperforming it by a couple of wins. And that's not abnormal. Early in the season, that happens, and it is really explained by the fact that the Giants have had some blowout wins. Not that we don't count those runs. We don't say, well, they're actually having trouble scoring if you take out all the times they scored a lot. We don't get to do that. But what it does say is that maybe that explains why they've underperformed their plus 44 run differential. But the big picture is that it's a very good thing when the season is one big game, you've only played 19, and you're winning by 44. That is a good thing. So, we're not going to get too down after one loss here. And really, they did look like a tired team to me. They unbelievably didn't really look tired until last night to me. So maybe it's just you look tired when you lose, and you lose 1-0, but the hitters, they just kind of look gassed, and I don't blame them. And so I think this is a much needed day off. And then you've got the Nationals coming into town. Hopefully you can just win a series there and then move on and play the Dodgers. I believe they have a day off on Monday. I'll have to check on that as well. But how about Jakob Junis for a minute? I mean, come on. This guy has just come in and been spectacular in his 2 relief outings. And I say long relief, and I get it, like he's relieving Sammy Long or Sam Long both times, and it's also long relief, so that's pretty funny there. But, I mean, he's thrown 10 innings. He's allowed 0 runs. He's struck out 29% of the batters he's faced. He's walked 3% of the batters he's faced, and he's got a 58.3% ground ball rate. And he's done it in a super unorthodox way. He's throwing his slider like 56% of the time, and the changeup 20% of the time. I think the slider's 54, whatever. It's over 50% of the time he's throwing his slider, and 20% of the time he's throwing his changeup. So we're talking about a guy who's featuring sliders and changeups about 3/4 of the time. And, we usually call non-fastballs secondary offerings. Well, guess what? The fastball is a tertiary offering for Jakob Junis. It's not even secondary. The slider is primary. The changeup is secondary, and it's actually a sinker is tertiary. He used to throw a 4-seam fastball when he was with the Royals about 1/3 of the time, but he's almost ditched it. He's throwing it between 5 to 10% of the time right now. It's mostly slider, changeup, and sinker. So the Giants have very much tweaked with his repertoire, and it has been extremely effective. I mean, these are like career best kind of numbers for Jakob Junis. It's obviously a small sample, but it's hard to fake what he's gone out there and done. He has just gone out there and been extremely effective. I mean, that slider is a really good pitch. It's got a ton of movement. It's sharp, and it's deceptive because hitters don't seem to really be able to pick it up. And when they swing, they're swinging and missing a lot. And if they put it in play, they're hitting it on the ground a lot. So Jakob Junis has kind of been a revelation with the San Francisco Giants here. They picked him up as a free agent. I think he was non-tendered by the Kansas City Royals was how he reached free agency, and the Giants picked him up, gave him a major league contract for $1.75 million. Seems like maybe the Giants know what they're doing when they pick these guys up off the scrap heap. Am I right? Like, Jakob Junis just comes in here. And what's crazy, too, is that he was getting lit up a little bit in AAA. But I watched one of those games, the opening day AAA game. Sure, some of you watched all of his starts. I didn't watch all of them, but I saw the opening day for AAA start, and I thought the pitches were good. He just kind of got hit around like unexpectedly in short order, and then he was out of the game. But I thought he looked pretty impressive. So he's actually under club control for 2 seasons. So if he continues to perform anything like this, the Giants can bring him back through the arbitration process for next year. And They've also got another guy like in a similar type of situation, Matthew Boyd. We haven't seen him yet. He's been in the dugout. I've noticed a couple shots of him. They gave him a $5.2 million contract for this year, knowing he wouldn't even be able to pitch until like June because he's rehabbing from an arm injury. But these guys that don't get a lot of attention, like Junis, like so many others over the course of the last several seasons, they come in and they do a good job. And Jakob Junis, very impressive to me, making a case to potentially make some starts. And if he's going to go like 5 innings, it doesn't necessarily have to be a game that's opened by Sam Long. I think part of the thinking is that teams are going to set their lineups to face a lefty, and then you bring in a righty after like 1 inning. It kind of backfired in a way because Chad Pinder leading off the game probably wouldn't be in there, or at least not leading off, if Junis had just started. And Pinder is kind of a lefty killer, their answer to like Austin Slater, and he hit a home run to lead off the game, and that was all the scoring in the game. But you can't look at something like that and say in hindsight that it was the wrong move to start Sam Long. You can't do it that way. You got to say it beforehand. Otherwise, you just can't make an evaluation like that in hindsight. So it didn't work, I guess. I mean, Sam Long has mostly been very good, but I mean, the takeaway for me is that Junis just continues to look really good. The Giants are going to have a huge roster crunch upcoming because on Tuesday, they've got to trim their roster by 2 spots. And they also have a bunch of guys close to returning from the injured list. LaMonte Wade Jr. and Mike Yastrzemski may be ready around Tuesday. And then Tommy La Stella and Evan Longoria may start rehab assignments next week. And so they're potentially like a couple weeks away from returning themselves. And so as good as this roster has been able to perform, there's going to be a ton of turnover here, assuming guys can come back and get healthy. That's like, what, 4 or 5 guys who are going to replace 4 or 5 guys on the roster, plus you have to trim by 2. And so there's going to be a lot of change up coming, and we're going to start talking about it a lot. We're going to do a mailbag tomorrow, and I'm sure that I'm going to get asked that question, and it's honestly difficult to even figure out what they're going to do. I'm going to have to get a spreadsheet out and start tweaking things around to figure out what they're going to do, because some guys can't even be optioned. Some guys they're going to have to re-add to the 40-man roster, like Yastrzemski and Littell came off the 40-man roster because of the COVID IL. You get an extra 40-man spot when someone goes on the COVID IL. And so I think they have 1 open 40-man spot right now, but they made another 40-man acquisition yesterday. And in addition to the trade they made with the Mariners to acquire Kevin Padlo 2 days ago, yesterday they claimed lefty reliever Darian Nunez from the Dodgers, and he just had Tommy John surgery like yesterday. And so it's similar to Luis Gonzalez. They're making a claim on a player who's injured. The Dodgers didn't want to pay for his rehab, essentially, but also they value the 40-man spot. The Giants obviously like Darian Nunez if they're willing to add him to the 40-man roster just to have him rehab for a year. So obviously it doesn't mean for sure he's going to stick around, because they could DFA him as well at some point, but it is just interesting that they make these types of moves. So coming up next, we'll maybe talk a little bit about that, but I also want to talk about A's president. What is his first name? I'm blanking on his first name. Cavill beefing with a fake seagull online on Twitter. So stay tuned for that. Dave Cavill, right? Yeah, Dave Cavill. BetOnline is your #1 source for all your sports betting stats and info. That's betonline.net. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of the Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. On our Locked On Twitter account, we're constantly putting out all these odds related to the NFL draft. So check that out and see if there's anything there that interests you. There's constantly great stuff being put out at BetOnline. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, as promised, Dave Cavill beefing with a seagull account online on Twitter. I'm sure you saw this. Maybe you didn't. Pretty hilarious. Not just the seagull, right? He was beefing with everybody. He shows up, right? He's the A's president, not the president of baseball operations. He's like the Larry Bear, I suppose, of the A's, kind of the public-facing representative of the owner, John Fisher. And so what's going on is obviously the A's have their own situation that they're dealing with perpetually, looking for a new stadium, going through these cycles where they have good players and then they trade them away and enter a rebuilding phase. They're pretty good at making those phases short and getting back to being competitive. And sure enough, this year already they're 10-9, and they kind of scrapped against the Giants in this series, and they've scrapped all season long. Of course, it is still early, and I think when all is said and done, they're going to be significantly below 500 would be my guess. But so they're going through that. People aren't happy in Oakland, and attendance has been terrible for their first few games. I think on opening day, they drew like 17,000 people. And for some of their other games, they're drawing less than 5,000 people a night. And the media has made a big deal about this. And I think it's irked him a little bit. And so he shows up, he's attending these Giants versus A's games in San Francisco, and he's tweeting about the attendance and like retweeting people who have sent in pictures to him of empty seats for Giants versus A's. And he's like, will the SF media talk about this? And tagging like Susan Slusser and John Shea and Ann Killian and all this. Just kind of childish behavior, the type of stuff we see on Twitter all the time, but not from presidents of baseball teams. And this Oracle Park Seagull account, which is like a parody comedy Seagull account, set like in a serious tone, was like, dude, you're the president of a baseball team, literally. Why don't you act like it instead of acting like a child? Something to that effect. I should really have it pulled up. But the Seagull said something to that effect. And then Cavil retweets the Seagull and is like, you're literally a seagull. I don't know. He's beefing with a seagull. I mean, he's like, the Seagull is getting under his skin. And to me, it's just pure comedy. And I must say, it perpetuates this ongoing, not theme, but just reality that the A's care so much more about the Giants than the Giants care about the A's. I'm sorry to say it, but I know A's fans, not our Locked On A's host. He's great. My other A's fan friends are great, but the people I like grew up rooting for the Giants and they grew up rooting for the A's, they consider it such a big rivalry. Like the Giants are the Dodgers to them. Like they view the Giants like we view the Dodgers. And the Giants do not feel the same way. Giants fans are like, oh, I like the A's. I root for the A's if the Giants aren't in it. And the A's are like, they just hate the Giants. They don't want that. And I mean, it's understandable, right? They're jealous. They're jealous of the fact that the Giants are the more popular team in the area. They're jealous of the ballpark. They're jealous of the fact that the Giants won 3 championships and the A's, I mean, arguably had much better like regular season success for a much longer period of time there in this century, essentially. But the Giants are the team that came away with the 3 titles and get all the attention and have the beautiful ballpark. I mean, it's very arguable the Giants have the best ballpark in the major leagues, and the A's very arguably have the worst ballpark in the major leagues. And so I would be jealous too, but it is just funny. Like, I think a lot of Giants fans aren't even aware that A's fans feel this way. I remember I went to an A's playoff game once just because, the Giants were not in the playoffs and I wanted to go. Wore a Giants hat. Big mistake. Like, they gave me such a hard time. I was there, like I'm saying, I was there to kind of pull for the A's in this playoff series. But they didn't want me there. Maybe I shouldn't have worn the hat. I just wanted to wear a hat, and it was the only hat I had because the sun was out, right? But anyway, Cavil is like taking this to heart, but really he's also like, A's fans don't like him either because he's on this parallel paths mission where he's like trying to get a stadium in Las Vegas in addition to a stadium in Oakland. And so they very well may end up leaving the Bay Area and going to Vegas. Something is going to happen. They'll either be at the Howard Terminal site in Oakland or they'll probably end up in Vegas. And for the longest time, I've always said, I hope they get a stadium. They deserve it. They're a major league team. That is not a major league stadium, really. and the renderings at Howard Terminal look beautiful. And I think a lot of Giants fans feel the same way, and they, again, want the best for the A's, but they don't feel the same way. And they come into San Francisco and they get so fired up about these games. Well, Giants fans don't really care. They wear the split hats and have a good time and don't consider it. I mean, we have a real rival, right, in the Dodgers. I don't think the A's really have that. And they really do have that like jealous little brother thing going on. So anyway, I just thought Kaval, you should check out the tweets. Ray Ratto, don't remember the medium on which he wrote this, but he wrote a really fantastic piece. I think it was titled something like Dave Kaval argues with a seagull and loses. Pretty great piece, actually. So I would encourage you to check it out if you haven't seen this. It's pretty funny. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Coming up tomorrow, we're going to do a mailbag. So if you have any questions about the Giants, look out on Twitter. You can follow me at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. I'll say SF Giants questions, please, and you can ask me a question there, and we will do our best to get to it tomorrow. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On MLB. Paul Francis Sullivan, please call him Sully, brings you his unique perspective on the major leagues past and present. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. Anyway, I can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thank you so much for listening. Stay Locked On Giants.